As you've heard 1,000 times by now, the Los Angeles Lakers shocked the sports world by trading for Luka Doncic on February 1st. But since then, they've managed to shock people even further. While it was expected that LA would improve, it didn't seem like this would be the year where they would really compete for the title. But in the 12 games Luka has played as a Laker, they've gone 8-4, and despite trading one of the premier defensive anchors in the NBA, they've still managed to have the fourth best defense in the league since the deal. As a result, the conversation has very much shifted to the Lakers very much being real contenders to win the West. However, with the dominance of the OKC Thunder, are LA's title hopes in 2025 actually real, or are people committing the classic sin of just overrating the Lakers? Let's talk about it. Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video. Check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you would like to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. But with that said, let's get into milking the Lakers for views. I mean, let's talk about if the Lakers are championship contenders or whatever the title is. So first things first, I want to talk about the defense because this has been the biggest surprise thus far with the Lakers. When this deal went down, pretty much everybody and their mother said, yes, their offense is going to improve substantially, but not having Anthony Davis is really going to pretty much expose just how mediocre this defense is otherwise. However, like I mentioned in the intro, they have been fourth in defensive rating with Luka Doncic on this team, and a lot of that is thanks to JJ Redick and the system that he's been running. The number one thing that has stood out defensively, the number one performance anyways, was against the Denver Nuggets, where they really shut out Nikola Jokic better than we've seen almost anyone ever do. There's a lot of wings on this team, a lot of versatility between Luka Doncic being 6'8", 6'9", LeBron being that height, Vando, Dorian Finney-Smith, who plays bigger than his height would suggest. Like, you have all of that. You have a Rui, who's like a 6'8", 6'9" wing around there. All of these guys are versatile. All of these guys are pretty strong, and you know, they can handle these matchups. They can handle switches. They're a very switch-heavy offense. They're a very aggressive, or very switch-heavy defense, and they're very aggressive. And it's kind of a system we've seen before. Not from the Lakers necessarily, but I do feel like historically we get these defenses where we're like, oh man, there's so much versatility, there's so much swarming, they're being super aggressive and shit. They're playing with this very, very specific ideology. Often we find that offenses are so adept at adjusting in the NBA that if you live in such a refined system defensively, eventually teams grow to overcome it, and then you're kind of left high and dry. So my only concern defensively is just that perhaps this is not something that will hold up, or more likely that teams will start to scheme for more appropriately than when it was, you know, initially brought to the table here. Like, teams are just now reacting to this defense. We need to see how well it holds up over time. So that is a huge staple of this. But I will say, I do feel good about the defense, because Vando and Dorian Finney-Smith are both really, really good defenders. Jackson Hayes has actually done a good job as a rim protector so far, which I gotta give him credit there. I did not expect that. And LeBron and Luka are playing much harder on the defensive end than they have in a long time. So I don't really think it's quite gimmicky, but I also don't think it will remain as effective as it has been to this point. But nevertheless, they could still be one of the better defenses in the postseason, and that's a hell of a lot better than I would have guessed they would have been upon the initial reaction to this deal going down. Another question is, how confident are we that LeBron can maintain this level of play, especially returning from an injury? I believe he's going to be out for 1 or 2 weeks with a groin injury. Possible he just picks up right where he left off, where he was incredibly dominant, especially for a 40-year-old, but it's also possible that he kind of is slow to get back into the swing of things. Maybe the chemistry offensively gets a little off because of that, and then suddenly the Lakers are looking substantially worse. I don't think this injury is big enough, and I think LeBron's track record of recovery is good enough that it's not a huge concern, but I'm not dismissing it as a possibility. It is something to look out for. My next question, how much does Luka's underperformance in the box score actually matter in terms of tangibly this team being better or worse? Like, is this just a reduced stats, but the team is better situation, or would the team be significantly better if Luka's putting up 33 points per game? Well, to me, while I think Luka averaging 24 points per game would be a little bit underwhelming for what he's capable of as an offensive engine, you don't need to go that low. I also have no problem with Luka not averaging over 30 points per game. I don't think that's necessary nor good for winning basketball. Obviously, the Dallas Mavericks made it to the NBA Finals that way, but it also felt inevitable that they were going to lose that series because the play style difference, the system difference, the Celtics just had an egalitarian, good, even system where everybody touches the ball. And the Mavericks were led by heliocentric Luka ball. And, I have always felt that getting a little bit more off-ball movement from Luka would be the right move. And we've seen the Lakers trying to mix that in a little bit. This year, I thought Luka was doing a great job of doing that with the Dallas Mavericks before they shipped him off. He had a career high in assisted buckets from 3 and from 2. And not just like a high, like a high, like way higher than before. So, I think a lot of it has been just Luka not quite adjusting to the new system, not quite adjusting to new teammates, mentally dealing with the change that this all was for him. So I'm not too concerned about the volume. I'm more worried about the efficiency. Last year, his shooting splits, while averaging 33 points per game, mind you, were 49, 38, 78 with an overall true shooting percentage of 61.7%, and he shot 7%, Jesus. And he shot 57% on twos. Unfortunately, as a Laker, his shooting splits are 40, 32, 74 with a true shooting percentage of 53.5%, which is an 8% dip, and he is shooting just 47% on two-pointers, which is a 10% dip from last year. I'm not really too worried about his three because Luka, it's funny because they both have the same problem. I don't know why I said Tatum, though. Luka has an inconsistency with his jump shot. He will sometimes just go through cold stretches where he's just shooting the ball very poorly. And that isn't a big deal to me. Him shooting the three pretty mediocre thus far, it is what it is. But the 2-point percentage, the twos are the thing that Luka has always been able to bank on. Inside the arc, he's just a master at scoring the ball, whether it's mid-range shots, floaters, driving inside. And his frequency and his efficiency at the basket with the Lakers has just not been as high as you would like it to be. Not as much easy offense. His mid-range shot has also not looked good in a Lakers uniform thus far, which is, again, it's just the shooting variant stuff. I'm really not too worried about that. But, I would be okay with Luka theoretically averaging 24, even if I think it should be higher, but he needs to be doing it on better efficiency than this, especially if they're going to be winning a championship. On the positive end of things, I really do think that he is going to pick it up a whole lot as time goes on. He's recovering from an injury. He's recovering from the shock of this trade, like I mentioned. So if you get a healthy Luka putting up, near 30 a game on regular Luka efficiency, that means that we're going to see an offense with this Lakers team that we've only seen in like 1 or 2 games of Luka playing like Luka. And getting that with consistency, oh boy, that's going to be scary on the offensive end. Next thing, what's the timeline, right? Like, when does Luka get back to full form? When does LeBron get back to full form? And, how do they build this chemistry going into the playoffs? How well are they going to feel going into things? Because it wouldn't surprise me if there were a couple of bumps in the road and suddenly things are not looking as cheery as they were initially. Is the supporting cast strong enough? I think Austin Reeves makes for a phenomenal third option, but he's not the strongest defender, and I sometimes worry about, the offense-defense balance when the three of them are out there, even with LeBron and Luka playing defense better than they have before. I don't necessarily trust having all three of those guys out there at the same time. I've liked how Rui has looked, especially as a play finisher. I feel like Rui has been consistently underutilized throughout his career, but simultaneously there's a lot of that I think comes down to him and his issues, because he shows you the ability as a catch and shoot guy, as a cutter, as someone who can post up on a mismatch and things like that. And lately, he's been doing really good at that because there is so much all-time generational playmaking sharing the floor at the same time. I also think JJ Redick has just been more creative about how he utilizes Rui than coaches who had him before. So I think those guys are good. I think they're doing what they're supposed to. Rui can sometimes be a little bit wishy-washy. He's one of those players who will have a game where you're like, God, that guy's fucking good and he should play 35 minutes a game. And then he'll have a game where you're like, what the hell is wrong with that guy? How has he ever ended up on an NBA floor? It doesn't make sense. On that spectrum for Rui, right now, he's very much on the damn, this guy's good. We just have to hope that he stays there. Now, Jackson Hayes being the lone center on this team, shout out to oh man, I'm saying shout out and I can't remember his fucking name right now. Jemison. He's been okay, but I don't think he's going to be in the playoff rotation. I'll be honest. And I don't know how much Jackson Hayes is going to manage to be in it because I do think he's doing as well as you could ask him to, but he is a highly limited player on both ends of the floor. You have to use him in really some specific situations, and I think the strength of this Lakers team will be their ability to go small. So I do think we're going to see them leaning on small ball lineups more and more and more. Gabe Vincent has been hitting his three-pointers, but he is limited just as a smaller defender, and he's not like some premier shot creator or anything, but you know, for 15 minutes per game in the playoffs, being a high-level spot-up three-point shooter and not a disaster at everything else, you know, it's solid. It's a good player to have, especially since his threes have really been going in. Vando is a huge part of this defense when he does manage to get out there, but he is virtually a zero offensively. He has shot 41% from three since the Luka deal, but it's on like one attempt a game. So, you know, it's not like I'm going to start believing in him as a shooter just based on that. I think he could get schemed out. The only real way that he ends up being as impactful as I would hope he would just be him at the five. Like, as I mentioned with the small ball stuff, let Vando essentially be your, you know, lob target guy, dump off in the dunker spot type guy. Stand in the corner, maybe he does a well-timed cut type of thing, and then have LeBron and Luka and Rui out there, Dorian Finney-Smith, and you just have a bunch of size and length and rebounding to the point where you can make up for the fact that Vando is 6'8". Vando's a really good rebounder. Luka's a really good rebounder. LeBron's a really good rebounder. You could have enough rebounding out there that you don't really pay the consequences of playing small all too much unless you're playing a team that's running double bigs, which they could potentially run into this year. We'll talk about that in a second. Dorian Finney-Smith has struggled on his three-point shot since the Luka deal. He's at just 30%. I have no worries about him. He has proven to be a good shooter for very long stretches over time, so it's just the cold streak. Dalton Connect's three ball has actually been good, and he's been playing more minutes than I would have expected because it seemed like he was kind of cut out of the rotation, but since then, on about 17 minutes a game, he's taking 4.6 threes and shooting 38% on them, or it's 19 minutes rather. I don't know how much playoff run he's going to get. He's not a very strong defender, and the aspects of his game besides for catch and shoot three-point shooting can often leave room to be desired. He has moments as a play finisher, for sure, moments where he drives off of the catch or does a well-timed cut. But I don't know. He just kind of exists out there a lot of the time other than his shooting ability. But his shooting's been good, so it at least merits him getting some opportunity. I just don't know how significant it will end up being. There's a lot of people on Lakers Twitter who feels like JJ just has a love affair with Dalton Connect and he shouldn't be in the rotation, but he is because JJ likes him. I'll say so long as he's shooting 38% on high volume from three in limited minutes, I do think it justifies playing the guy. Jordan Goodwin plays really hard, and he has been hitting his threes since he's been back, so he might actually get real burn. I'm not too sure. He's an otherwise, you know, unexperienced player. He had a horrible turnover the other day, one of the worst turnovers I've ever seen in an NBA game. But he plays good defense. Even though he's kind of small, he plays bigger than he is, and he's hit his three-pointers, so he could get some opportunity. So how do they match up against some of the best teams in the Western Conference? Well, just going through the teams that I think are actually contenders in the West, I think they can beat Houston with their superior half-court offense. Houston is a really good defense, and they're a really good fast break team. However, they hang their hat on that, and their half-court offense is kind of poo-poo. You can't really win championships and be a true contender being bad half court offense. That's just historically not something that happens. So, gotta say, I'm pretty certain they would beat Houston. This is also we're going into this with the assumption Luka and LeBron are fairly healthy, and I guess we can view this as a best case, worst case type thing. But I don't even think you need a best case to beat Houston. I think that one's pretty doable. I think they can beat Memphis purely on the merit of their star power. Memphis is undeniably a deeper, more well-rounded team with a better, more complicated offensive system. But I wouldn't go as far as to say that they are way better just simply because of the difference in the lead options. Now, Ja Morant could ramp his way up, and that ends up changing things a little bit. But Luka and LeBron, especially at full steam, I think it will overcome the difference in depth. As for Denver, I think it'll kind of be dependent on if Jokic's supporting cast leaves him high and dry. Jamal Murray's been having a good regular season this year. Russell Westbrook, a lot of the magic of him in Denver has soured a little bit lately, which unfortunately is kind of a cycle with him, but he does still do a lot of good stuff for them. Aaron Gordon's been hitting his threes, which is huge for them. Christian Brown's taken the huge leap that he has as an offensive player. So they have a lot of good stuff going for them right now, but they kind of have this thing, and they have all year, where they kind of just flip back and forth between them being good or not. So if they're on one of those bad patches where they're just like perplexingly bad, despite Jokic being a generational talent, it would require something like that. I think if you got a really good Jamal, really good MPJ, really good Aaron Gordon, good Christian Brown, I think at that point you might be cooked. But if guys aren't hitting their shots, Jamal Murray is not elevating at all, if anything, kind of crumbling under the pressure, I think LA has a very, very easy lane there. It pretty much depends on how much Jokic's teammates show up for him. Okay, now we get to OKC. OKC is a tough sell, let me tell you. To beat them, you'd probably need an injury on your side to be, frank. I hate to bring up injuries as a factor, but it is, when we're talking about some of these top teams, if they have an injury to like Chet Holmgren or Jalen Williams or even just like an Isaiah Hartenstein, that can make a real difference. And OKC has kind of had guys in and out of the lineup all year, so if that ended up being the case in the postseason, it really wouldn't be the least bit surprising. Beyond that, LA does have a size advantage, kind of. It depends on if the Chet and Hart lineups are happening. Again, dependent on that injury stuff, but also how dependent on how well that lineup ends up working out for OKC. They've only done it in limited spurts thus far, and it's had some moments, it's had some low points. We'll have to see how legit that is, but if it is legit, which I think it could be, this could be a great way to mitigate what is otherwise a size advantage for the Lakers, because the OKC Thunder, while they are an all-time great defense, they do have a lot of smaller perimeter defenders. Cason Wallace, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, all of these guys are like 6'4" and below. Cason Wallace might be 6'5". J-Dub is 6'5". There is definitely a pretty significant height advantage for LA's two superstar players. Lou Dort historically does a pretty good job defending Luka, so I don't think that's like a mismatch by any means. And J-Dub plays big enough that I think he could handle a LeBron matchup, but it's definitely not ideal. For both of them, I would like somebody taller and longer, but this is what OKC has, so there could definitely be some get big moments from the Lakers here. I could also see them really dominating with their small ball, just because their small ball features a bunch of wings who are taller than OKC's version of small ball. But at the end of the day, I do think a perfectly healthy OKC Thunder team is all but certainly going to beat this Lakers team. I would say for this to happen, LA would have to be perfect, and OKC would have to have a handful of things not go their way. That makes it possible, but it doesn't make it too likely. I would say LA wins this. If you simulate it 10 times, 1 or 2. So it's possible. And again, if injury luck goes your way, maybe there's some shooting variance luck because OKC has some shooting problems. Then again, so do the Lakers at times. I don't know. I think there is an avenue, but it's really, really, really hard to convince me that that would actually happen. If they did manage to make it out of the West, could they actually win it all? Well, there's only really two teams that I think are going to come out of the East, that being the Cavs and the Celtics. I'm not really going to bother with anybody else. If another team beyond those two makes it, yeah, the Lakers could beat them. But to talk about Cleveland, they would have to just spam mismatch hunting. That would have to be the number one catalyst in breaking their defense, because there's really no other way to do it. You once again have to deal with a double big situation, but this time it's actually, tried and true, actually tested, and multiple good results to come of it. We've seen that shit definitely works, and I don't really feel like there's much likelihood that that could be mitigated by the Lakers. Garland and Mitchell are small, so if you can get a Luka or LeBron switch onto those guys, you can abuse that and cause the defense to collapse in. But then again, they have Mobley and Allen on the back line, so how much is that actually going to result in a good shot versus just driving into traffic? If the double bigs can clean up the mess of their smaller guards, and then on the other end, the Lakers are trying to play small and that doesn't work, and then they have to play Jackson Hayes, who looks like food to Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, I think that's just a nightmarish situation. I feel like they're just about as bad of a matchup as you could really ask for, just because of how much that paint dominance is really going to bite them. I do like the idea of Cleveland versus LA just for the LeBron thing, but I would lean Cavs over Lakers, unfortunately. But to move on to the idea of Boston, again, injuries are something that could really come into play to boost your odds. Just because that is the history of the Celtics. They have had some injury stuff the whole way through. Even when they won the title, they had some injury plaguing stuff. So if you get the right one at the right time, that does open up a window. I fear that LeBron and Luka's defense would not hold up very well if both of them had to defend Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown throughout a majority of a series. Maybe they wouldn't both have to 100% of the time they're on the floor, but it would be a lot of the game, a large percentage of the game, and especially late in the game. And man, I don't like that at all. Even though if the size theoretically makes sense and it could work, I just don't feel good about that. JB also tends to eat Luka's lunch. I don't know what it is. Jaylen Brown's just really good at defending Luka, like almost superhumanly so, more so than anyone else that I have honestly ever seen. Did a great job on him in the Lakers game recently. Tatum has the size and the ability and the strength to defend LeBron, so honestly, they have a perfect matchup for LA's two superstars. And one thing that LA typically has on all these other teams in the league is that, like, you have to put your two best perimeter defenders on LeBron and Luka, and then you have to put your third best perimeter defender on Austin Reeves. That is a bad situation to be in. That is a, dare I say, dire situation to be in. However, for the Boston Celtics, their third option and their fourth option for Austin Reeves, that's fucking Drew Holiday and Derek White. So there is a A-plus matchup for all three of your best perimeter players. That is tough, bro. That is a very, very, very tough situation to be in. I think that defensive matchup is so significant that it would require injury and extreme shooting variance for LA to beat Boston. I don't think that they could beat the Cavs, but I especially don't think they could beat Boston. Like, even if LeBron and Luka are theoretically a better top two than Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, not even theoretically, they are. Even if Austin Reeves is a better three than Boston's third best player, at least offensively speaking, the supporting cast ends up making the difference. The system that is tried and true and has a history of working will ultimately pass the test. I just don't see a world where they beat a healthy Celtics. I really don't see a world where they beat a healthy Cavs, and I really don't see a world where they beat the OKC Thunder. And hey, I don't think there's any shame in that, because you know what I would say? I would say that about every other fucking team in the league that isn't the Cavs, the Celtics, or the Thunder. Those three teams are in another league of their own, and I would just be so shocked if they were not the team to win it. But that said, if there was a fourth option, I'm kind of teetering between the Lakers and the Nuggets and the Warriors as my fourth option. I am leaning Lakers of those three, but depending on how I feel, depending on the day of the week, I kind of go back and forth. Jokic at least has a history with his teammates, so he has that to his advantage. If they play well alongside him, he's good enough that he can take them very far. I really love Jimmy and Steph's combination in Golden State, and I'm a very high on that team. But Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves is a remarkable offensive trio. Their defense is very, very good, way better than it has any right to be. So they have a lot of things working in their favor. But I don't think it's enough yet. I think they need, even if it's just like a B- level retool in the offseason, that would be enough to get this team right in the driver's seat of contention. As long as LeBron can give you another year, maybe two, I think they can win a title in 2026 or 2027. This roster just needs some extra oomph to it. Luka needs to be healthy for a prolonged period. This team needs a training camp and all that. Maybe some internal improvement from Austin Reeves, who gets better and better as the years go on. Maybe you trade Austin Reeves for, Cam Johnson and Nicholas Claxton or some shit like that. Like you get just, go for a maximum role player deal. I don't know. There's stuff that the Lakers can do, and I feel very good about them. It's just not this year, and that's okay. You can't expect to just have the championship land in your lap. I mean, they are the Lakers, and Luka did just land in their lap. So I would understand why if is it entitlement if you always get it? Like, are you being entitled if you are entitled to it? You know what I mean? I don't know what I mean. It's too late. I'm not even lucid right now. Thank you for watching.